Hello, Saul here. Saul Talks about stuff. I have an important video. It's been a minute since we made a video, and I apologize for that. This question, though, is an important one, and I want to get into the topic pretty quickly here. For those that don't know, my name is Saul. I answer questions on the internet from people that ask me on Twitter and Discord and YouTube comments. I'm a business owner. I've been doing it for almost 10 years, five businesses, quite a few people that I employ, quite a few different areas between software, 3PLs, Amazon, reselling, our own D2C brand, etc. And some really cool communities that I get to run. And that's where a lot of these questions come from. So the one that I'm answering today is near and dear to me because I sucked at it for a long time. And from what I've seen online and people I talk to, it's not easy. And a lot of people either want to do it and don't know how or do it too soon. And that is hiring and delegation. A really good friend of mine recently asked to make sure that I made a video on this, and it was already on my list, but I bumped it to the top. To give you some stats, I do have five entities that do something or other. So again, some of that software, some of that is selling physical products on the internet. Some of that is shipping products to to the customers that buy them off the internet. Um, Between those, we have 28 staff. Some are full time, some are part time, some are contractors, and payroll is about $60,000 a month across the five. Um, I've hired, I don't know, maybe 200 people in my lifetime. As I said, right now, about 28 currently work for me. Prior to starting my own business, I was middle management and I had about 25 or so that were working for me at any given time, but the churn rate was a bit higher there. So a lot of interviews came over that 6 year period. Fortunately, right now, when I hire someone, generally for my current roles, they tend to stick around, which is really cool because hiring is tedious. Okay, so I took some notes over here. So if I look over my left, that's what I'm doing. I have hiring 101 and delegation. They kind of go hand in hand, but they're a little bit different because you can hire the wrong person. You can hire and not know how to delegate. You can hire for the wrong role. So the first question I have written down is when is the right time to hire? Um, it's going to vary a little bit depending on who you are and where you are in your business and your life. For most people, I recommend hiring when you've, either hit or very close to hitting a personal wall of some kind in your business. May it be you don't have enough time to do X because you're spending too much time doing Y. May it be your business is, you know the pathway to growth, but you just don't have enough time to do it all yourself. Usually it comes down to you needing more bodies, right? More minds, more people to do something that either you're doing or don't know how to do. It kind of falls into those two camps. When I first started hiring, this was my very first hire was probably 13 years ago. Um, I would mostly hire what I consider now bodies, right? Which I try not to do anymore. But these are people, you're hiring because you have a specific role in mind. I'm hiring for someone to do sales, someone to pick up the phone and call prospects, someone to answer emails. And so you get resumes, you get CVs, and you essentially you're just hiring a person to sit in that chair and do that job. And I believe now, after doing it long enough, that that is for most roles the wrong way to look at it. What I do now is, and I actively tell people I'm interviewing this, like I don't want to hire a body. I firmly believe I can train anyone to do most things. So 9 out of 10 of my hires, their resumes are important, but what they've done physically, their experience is actually a little bit less important than how they've done it and the type of human they are, how they've handled problems, how they've navigated through career, even like some of their like, no, I'm not gonna say social circle, but how they communicate and hold themselves in social settings. The type of person they are, personality wise. That to me is quote unquote the X factor when I hire and arguably the kind of the A hire that I want as opposed to like a B player and A player. Um, Most again, I think 9 out of 10 roles that person watching this is hiring for, you can train, right? You've probably done it. You're hiring for an Amazon business. You're hiring someone to source inventory. You've sourced inventory, so you've done that. You're hiring someone to prep in a warehouse. You've done that. You're hiring someone to do admin. You've done that. Like as a business owner, you've likely done pretty much everything in your role or in that job, not like 90%, I should say. So 9 out of 10 hires that you're making, you're likely hiring for something that you've done and you can train. Doesn't mean that you have done them perfect, right? Or that you know exactly how to do it like nuts to bolts, but you've done it well enough to train someone to start. And then that's where the person comes into play because the right person will learn from you, but then also actively learn proactively on their own. They're going to go independently out there. They're going to start watching content. They're going to read books. They're going to take suggestion from you. Hey, like there's this thing going on. There's this YouTube series. There's this great book series. I'm going to pay for some additional training for you. And those are the type of people that are going to be excited to do that. So that's when we talk about hiring or like the type of person that I hire for 90% of the roles. It's yes, it's great if I'm hiring someone in sales who's done some level of sales before, but not necessity, right? It's more like if I'm hiring for sales and that's going to be someone on the phone or someone answering emails, how speedy are they in their communication? How well are they spoken? Like how well spoken are they? How chameleon, right? Like, can they fit in with multiple different types of personalities? Do they interact well with people older than them, younger than them, similar styles to them? The right person for a sales role is someone that can, I can say morph, but when they get on the phone with a prospect or they are emailing back and forth, they read the room really well, right? They read, they understand, they have empathy, sympathy. And so they don't have to know how to sell something to be good at that. That's something that's hard to teach. It's hard to teach that level of that ability, but you can certainly teach them how to sell your particular product, right? And or you can buy trainings for them. So if I was going to hire someone for sales and they were amazing, their history was like top-notch sales companies, but they were dry as a board and they didn't know how to read the room and they turned off customers, their experience doesn't matter at that point. And generally, what I find, the more experience they have, maybe the more rigid they are in wanting to learn new things, right? They're less open to change. Not all the time, but certainly some of the time. I've been fortunate to be able to hire people much older than me, and some of them are absolutely like, yeah, like, hey, I'm open to anything. I've done this for 30 years, but like I don't know it all. And like the people with less ego, like I love those folks. So when it comes to, we kind of talked when is the right time. We kind of talked about that very briefly, but I actually think it's more important to talk about the type of person. That's the type of person I like to hire. The latest hire I did was for one of our customer service roles for a D2C brand. So that is an email focused role, interacting with customers on a daily basis who, some percentage of them are just going to have order problems, but another chunk of them are going to have, hey, is this product right for me problems? I have XYZ. Is this going to be a good fit for my life? How do I haven't bought it yet, but how would I use this to benefit me? Kind of stuff. And again, I can teach that individual what our product does, how it works, why it benefits the general public, but I can't teach them as quickly or as easily how to take in information from that person and then give it back to them in a way that makes them feel good, or how to understand between the lines what they're actually saying. They say X, but they actually mean Y, and you kind of get that through experience or just through your upbringing or through just the life you've lived. It's much harder to train and teach that quickly than it is to just teach them what the heck it is we sell, and then they can kind of they can have the gap stop and they can figure out how they're going to translate that then into making the customer feel seen and heard and interested. And so that was a pretty smooth hire. Um, I again been pretty fortunate over the last, I would say 5 years in particular, that very, very, very low churn and in the people I hire. And that comes down to my next point, which is kind of where to look, right? So how do I personally hire most of my folks? And then if I can't find anyone in that way, like what's plan B? So plan A, and I think you're going to see this a lot on the internet, right? I love people that come from personal recommendations. So if I have current employees that I like, right, that I do a great job, again, going back to the type of person they are, I think people attract what they are. And so if you're a great employee and you are a hard worker and you're, again, when I go back to proactive, like proactive learning, right? You kind of seek out problems, you come up with your own solutions, you test things on your own, way less hand holding. I expect that a percentage of the people you hang out with are going to be that way too. And so if I'm hiring, very first thing I'm going to do is start with people that I already have. Do they know anyone? I don't even care if it's family. I know some people don't like hiring family of employees. I've certainly been there on the receiving end of some of those problems, and honestly, I've done it all. Like I've had husband wife work for me, I've had mother daughter work for me, I've had cousins work for me, uh, brother sister, people that were dating. That one's probably the riskiest. But I do like the whole friend thing. I think it works well, especially if you can keep them, right? You can keep employees long term. Part of the benefit of the employees see in you in your business is the work environment. So it's not just the work they get to do, but it's also the environment they're in. And if they're working with their friends, they're way more likely to stick around. So that's where I start. And I get a little pushy, right? So I'll mention it to the team. If there's anyone that immediately jumps out and is like, "Oh yeah, I have a friend," great. But I'll talk about it pretty much every call, right? Every meeting, I'm like, "Hey, we're going to be hiring for customer service in this space." So in this exact role, I knew we were hiring. I knew we had a runway. I wanted to hire someone before the holidays. So I kind of started my search in August, thinking, "Hey, I need to have someone in and trained by November 1st." Um, and so I mentioned it to the team in August. No one bit. No one was like, "Oh yeah." I mentioned it again 2 weeks later. I had two people who were like, "Oh, maybe there's someone." And so they reached out, and then I followed up with them, and they're like, they weren't interested and get back to me. So then I think, probably mentioned it another, the next 2 weeks every meeting. And it wasn't until late, like middle of September. So it was a month, maybe probably 6 weeks after I first mentioned it, where then on calls, anyone that had shown even brief interest, like saying, "Oh, I might know someone," or I thought that they were in a position, generally speaking, if they're already doing CS or if they're doing an adjacent role, like we have someone in that helps with our marketing. She isn't doing CS, but I think there's a lot of overlap there. Um, and they're kind of the right demographic. I think for a lot of times when I hire, I don't really care where they're from or who they are. But I also know over hiring lots of people that there are certain personality types that kind of fit in and do really, really well in certain roles. And so um, for CS, it's a lot of I've hired a lot of students. I've hired a lot of people that work full time elsewhere, but want a part time job. I've hired a lot of parents, and so the person who I was talking to in marketing, she she lives in Chile, and I I had mentioned it a couple weeks ago prior, and she said that there might be someone. So then coming into September, I started having one-on-ones with people. I was like, "Hey, you mentioned that, like, 100%, I'm going to have to post this publicly. I'm going to go hire someone in the next 2 weeks. Do you have anyone? Like, is there anyone in your life or in your circle?" And she goes, "You know what? There is actually." Um, and that is the person I end up hiring. And so, again, that's not the first time that's happened. I think you just kind of people don't connect all the time. You have to say things multiple times sometimes for them to think of that person that they're maybe if they just had lunch with them, but prior to that they weren't thinking of them, or maybe they saw something on Facebook or Instagram. Like the more you bring it up, the more likely they are to kind of connect the dots for you. And that's why I do, if you can give yourself a runway to hire, certainly, 3 months is probably where I would give. Obviously, if you have hired before for this particular role, um, it's probably going to be faster. It also depends on the role. A warehouse employee, if you already have a supervisor and a manager in place, that can go faster than hiring your very first employee or someone that's going to have a larger role in your company. I would say 2 or 3 months though should kind of be your wiggle room. The faster you have to hire, the last minute you have to hire, the more likely you are to end up with someone that might not be a great fit. So, um, yeah, so she introduced me. She emailed, kind of laid the groundwork. I then followed up. We had a meeting. So essentially, what I then do next, right? So what does the interview process look like for someone who's been recommended to me? I always do 2 rounds of interviews. Generally speaking, a lot of the people I hire are remote. So I think people watching this, you're going to be hiring some level of remote employee as well if you're working on Amazon or an e-commerce store. I think remote is fine. I do 2 remote interviews. Essentially, I do it's like a phone interview. Like I do essentially a "Are you sure you want this?" interview. So that's we've emailed. I've asked some level of questions via email. I always ask for at least one thing via email because like what I want to know is how quickly they reply and their level of communication style. So when we email, I'm always like maybe they sent me the resume maybe I ask for it again, or maybe I ask for something, whatever it is. I ask for like one piece of information. How fast do they get back to me? And how thorough is that? So it's like a very, very, very small amount of homework that doesn't feel like homework. Uh, so that's step one. Honestly, a lot of them just don't do that. Or they take 3 days, right? If you're interested in the role, and I email you on a Monday and I say, hey, can you resend me your resume? Right? Simple task. And you resend to me on Thursday, and I'm hiring you for a role that's email dependent that requires a person that is attentive to detail. That isn't the greatest look. Um, Especially if I say in the email, hey, I want to meet with you this week. Can you resend me your resume and we can schedule a call? And then that's Monday and you don't send me till Thursday. Well, I said we wanted to meet this week. I understand if you're busy. I personally believe though, similar to dating, right? Like if you're interested and you'll find a way and you'll find time. It takes, 2 seconds to go on your phone and email, to jump on the computer, if this is something that you're interested in doing. So some people just kind of weed themselves out that way. Some people honestly just don't reply. And that's fine too. So first step is some version of a back and forth. Number two, I try to do some kind of like stage one interview. It could be a phone interview. It could be a video interview. If I'm hiring in person, it's always a phone interview. If I'm hiring remote, sometimes it's video first. Um, and that is kind of quote unquote a more conventional interview. For me, going back to my first point, when I interview, I talk a lot less about their experience. I straight up tell them, up front, this is going to be more of a conversation than an interview. I don't have a series of questions. We're going to go down to answer question, answer question. I want to have a conversation with you as a human. I really just enjoy hiring humans, not robots, not bodies. I want to get to understand what's in their mind, their personality. And so, yes, I'll look at the resume and we'll have some conversations about their past, but it's more specific things that they've done as opposed to where they've worked and how they got the job and all of that. It's, let's say I was, hiring for customer support and someone used to work at J. Crew. Well, I'm not going to necessarily ask them like specifically about the J. Crew. I'm going to ask them more about a thing that when they worked at J. Crew doing customer support, what is something that they wanted to change about their job, about their role. How did they interact? Like, what did they find that their favorite thing their boss did, right? So, how did their boss interact with them that they really appreciated? How did someone interact with them they did not appreciate? Like, how are they best managed, essentially? Um, how did they, were they encouraged to bring up new ideas? If so, like, how did they? What were some of those ideas? Were they implemented? Um, how did they go about, again, I'm a fail first kind of guy. So when I hire someone, I really push them to fail very quickly. I tell them aggressively that, there's very little that they can do to mess up that we can't fix. And so it's great when they have a history of trying things, of proactively trying things. I really love, you know, a lot of times I hire people that are in their 20s or 30s, so they're kind of closer to the school age. And so it's great to me to understand, like, I want to talk about something they're really passionate about. So if they have advanced degrees, what did they write? What was like their thesis on? If they have, anything in school, like what is a project they did that they really enjoyed? Like what is the subject matter that really speaks to them? Why? It's great to understand what they want outside of work, like what moves them as people, what motivates them, where do they want to be. When I said like, hey, what is the dream? I usually don't mean like what is the career dream. I mean like what is the dream? Like, oh, I want to own a farm with 100 dogs. Like that's a dream that's not specific to their career. Some people have career dreams, which is great, but like the question is designed not to be specific to their career. Again, I'm looking for personality fit. I'm looking for how they interact. I feel very confident I can train most of these folks to do the job I want. But by the end of my hour interview, I really want it to feel like a kind of a conversation you'd have over coffee. Like I want, the walls to come down a little bit and just to feel comfortable because when we work together, we are going to work quite a bit together. And while some of my staff, are very project focused, like do this, yes, and I'm going to go do it. I'm going to come back to you. A lot of the roles, are startup-esque, right? I think almost anything you hire for Amazon or e-com is pretty startup focused. Our D2C, I would consider a startup, even though we do, 8 million a year. Um, I think a lot of the things that we do aren't, we're not giant corporations. And so when you're not hiring for giant corporation, a lot of the times you hire staff for a role, but they have to wear lots of hats. They have to do lots of things. And that just requires the ability to communicate back and forth quickly and proficiently and in a friendly manner. Um, and so I would, that is really helpful for me to get that understanding of how they're interacting. So by the end of the interview, it feels like, yes, okay, we have a rapport. And as we're working together, we can, they're going to feel comfortable bringing me ideas. They're going to feel comfortable breaching outside of just like the specific role that I hired them for, because that's what I want them to want to do and to feel. So again, uh, yeah, kind of the how do I interview that's pretty much it. It's very conversation based. It's very, more a personality, per, empathy, sympathy. I kind of talked about it a little bit. I'm missing I can't think of the exact word I want to say, but uh, making them feel seen, making them feel heard, understanding what motivates them. Is it money, right? Is it freedom? Is it providing for their family? Like what gets them out of bed excited in the morning? Why now? Why this job? Like why are we here today? And if it's money, that's fine. Being motivated by money is not a bad thing, but it's great to understand that what motivates them, because eventually your job is going to be to motivate them. Like that's kind of a lot of your job as an employer is to keep your staff motivated. Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that kind of goes in. I think every interview is kind of unique that I do, but they all kind of service back to that like connect as human mentality. Again, this is going to 9 out of 10 of the staff that we look for. The 1 out of 10, those are the experts. Those are the people that you hire to own an entire category or line of thinking around your product. So there's a slightly different curriculum for them when we hire. So, for example, if I'm hiring someone to lead our entire paid spend department, so that's like their job is to spend $200,000 a month on Facebook. Um, I do need them to know what they're doing, right? I can't train them to do as if I knew how to do the job as an expert, then yeah, maybe I could hire someone to train them. But at the end of the day, like I like to hire people that I can trust their brains and I like, hey, I hired you because you know how to do this. And so I'm gonna kind of ask you questions and we're gonna back and forth. But like at the end of the day, like I think that you're an expert in this particular field. Now they still have to be able to work as a team. Personality is still a huge factor, but I do ask then more questions and more things related to the particular work that I'm hiring for, as opposed to again 90% of the people I hire, it's more of a personality and work fit and employee. Can they fit with the existing crew? Um, Proactive nature, all of that. The other one's a little bit more expert level. And again, I think that's about 10% of the people I hire is more like expert level, because you really only need like one of those per department. And you might have skill sets already that are expert level. So you can go hire and train. It's just like the gaps that you have, like where like I understand meta, I understand it well enough to be a little bit dangerous and ask questions, but I'm certainly not, uh, you know, the people that we have working in those roles, they crush it, right? They wake up thinking about it, and that's all they think about. And every new tool that comes in the market, AI or otherwise, they're like, how do I use this to spend more money on Meta? I don't do that, right? I don't have the flexibility to do that with everything else that I do. So those are the people I want to hire that are already experts at some level, and then yeah, we continue to train them through classes and things. I'm happy to do that. But it's a little bit different than the 90% we talked about. So then like it goes to the next phase, like, well, how to train. So we've talked about interviewing. So I have interviewed. So that was kind of remote. I have a warehouse here. I have people that work at the warehouse. For those folks, I actually had to use Indeed. So I'm not against, right? If I don't have anyone in my network, I'll go out. For those guys, I used Indeed. I posted a job within like a week. I had 400 applicants. It was pretty insane. And that's, not unexpected, particularly in-person jobs that don't have high levels of requirements. And for those, I just reviewed resumes pretty aggressively. I was looking again kind of between the lines. What did they do, but more like how long did they work there, and what do they talk about in those jobs? Like how do they describe the job in their resume, is important to me as opposed to like what they did. Huge gaps in employment, maybe what was going on there, that kind of thing. And so for the 400, I think I probably personally read 75, because I was sending out messages as I was finding good ones. I messaged everyone on Indeed and said, hey, so your resume, I'm interested. Are you still interested? Please reply. Half the people never replied, right? So just kind of weeds them out. The people that replied said, great. And then I sent them a Google form for them to fill out. And I actually asked them to record a brief video, like a 5-minute video, essentially like a video resume. So of the, let's say I had 75 people that I messaged, 35 of them said yes. Of the 35 that I sent it to, maybe 15 actually did it. So now we went from 75 to 15 without me talking to anyone. Of the 15, then I did try to schedule interviews, video interviews. And I think of the 15, 5 showed up. Either 10, the other 10 didn't schedule or ghosted me. So then we had 5 show up, interviewed 5, hired 1. So, that's why we talk about taking, I recommend kind of giving yourself 2 to 3 months. There's going to be a lot of people. When you first post a job, you're going to see like a lot of interest, but just know it's like a much smaller percentage of them are actually going to be able to go all the way to the last round. And it's part of your job is to create checkpoints between them applying and getting hired that aren't super time intensive for you. So again, that's simply messaging them and asking them to reply. That's asking them to fill out a form. That's asking them to make a brief video. Like every quote unquote hoop is just an opportunity for someone to remove themselves from contention. Um, and that's why, you see like C-suite, right? The executive level jobs, they go through like 8 rounds of interviews, right? There's tons and tons of interviews that happen. And that's because number one, they want to make sure they get it right. It's a lot of money and equity usually on the line. But number two, it also helps them weed out folks, right? It's just like let people remove themselves and go from 400 to 25, without having to, interview or try to interview everyone, because that's a full-time job in itself. So you find someone and you want to offer them the job. Of course, you have to figure out financials and all of that. I like to pay well. So, I start at for local, actually for my the warehouse staff and for customer service, I start at $20 an hour. A lot of times job listings in my area are $15 an hour. But I'm a big, you kind of get what you pay for, and I want people to be motivated. I want the right people to be interested. Um, you know, I find that, if someone's working a job at Chick-fil-A, Chick-fil-A is a really great training program. So those people are actually really well trained already, but Chick-fil-A doesn't pay as well. So maybe I can go and I can pay them a bit more and they want to give their hours to me instead of Chick-fil-A, but Chick-fil-A did a lot of the legwork. So if you can pay up a bit, oftentimes you can get people that kind of come, at least, not pre-trained necessarily in exactly what you want, but they've worked in environments that coincide well with what you're looking for. And I also find, of course, like, and this isn't rocket science, if you can pay someone well, they're more likely to stick with you because, they get to then take that money and use it for the personal life. If that's kids, if that's family, if that's home, if that's vacation, whatever. Jumping from a $25 an hour job down to a 17-hour job is a big hit financially. So if you can pay up, you tend to get people that last longer. So I always start at just slightly, above market rate, and then I work in a pretty aggressive raise schedule. I used to working in corporations, and it was like 3% a year was kind of standard. I think that's insane. Um, so I will hire them in day one, essentially help them understand what that raise schedule looks like. So for someone, for example, the person in the warehouse, she started at 20. Within 6 months, she was at 25. So what I'll do is, we'll have a 3-month period, a 3 month training period. Um, call it whatever you want. I don't know. There's a word that some people call it, but 3-month period where it's like a trial basis, if you will. Um, and that's going to be at the 20. And we're, at the end of that 3 months, X, Y, Z things, like they need to be good at these things. They need to be able to do these things. If they can do all that and everything's good, they're going to get a bump. They're going to immediately get a bump to, I think it was 22 is what I bumped her to. Um, and then we're going to do it again. We're going to say, all right, hey, we're at 22. You're crushing it. Great job. We're going to reassess in 6 months. And if you continue to do these things, or like we're going to add tasks over the next 6 months as we add new things, and we're still working together and it's going well, at 6 months, we're going to go up to 23, 24, 25. There is usually a ceiling, right? I think right now 25 is kind of like where she's going to be for a bit. And then we'll work, potentially as I bring on more team members to the warehouse, she then moves to a managerial role, then that's a $30 an hour job. But she's going to be prepared for that because of all the training that we've done ahead of time. And that's worked really well for me. I've done it remotely and in person, and I think having those like clear expectations and building them out far enough in advance, so it's not like, oh, and having multiple, so it's not like, oh, they work great for 3 months, they get a little bump, and then they kind of like dwindle down again. It's like, oh, we're gonna do 3 months, we're gonna do 6 months. Some people do first 6 months and then a year. I find like 3 months is nice because like 90-day sprints. And then you extend it to 6 months, and then you probably extend it to a year after that. So every like you get 3 month raise, 6 month raise, and then 12 or will be 18 months after they get hired. So like 3 tiers. Because the last thing you want to do, and what I tell people when I interview is like, I really hate hiring people with an expiration date. It's timely and expensive to hire someone, right? You put a lot of effort in training them, a lot of effort into finding them. Last thing you want is to hire someone and then have them leave in 3 months or 6 months. Honestly, I even hate when they leave within like a year. So best case scenario for me is I have someone for at least 3 years, right? That's great. And been fortunate that's occurred. But I think part of it is from the day they get hired, I essentially build in an 18-month plan, right? Build in a plan that says, hey, over the next 18 months, we're going to reward you as long as work keeps going well. They're incentivized to stay at least 18 months. And it keeps them engaged and keeps them interested. And part of the training of that is, train them well. It's if they fail, it's on you. If you've done the interviews well and you found the right person and you believe, again, there are going to be some rare exceptions where like everything went perfect and the hire was just like the wrong fit and you just didn't see it, and that's definitely happened. I've unfortunately had to let people go, and it never is fun. But if you've done everything right to begin with, there's a lower chance of that happening, and so you got to trust that process. And then you get someone in, and then you train them, and if they don't do well after that, you have to take some of the blame for a while. Now, again, eventually, it's not going to be on you entirely, but I think as an employer, your staff and your team, they're going to be as successful as you let them be, and you help them be. And so that's a huge I'm gonna say a failing point, but that's something you definitely see with owners that have high churn. It could be that they hire poorly, but it also very well, and oftentimes I do see this, is they train or they manage poorly because you can't. The thing that I see a lot on the internet is like, well, I hired someone and they're already trained by someone else, and they're just gonna immediately start and like plug and play, and that might work rarely, but I don't believe that's gonna work most of the time or long term. Um, you really, because you don't know how they were trained, and you have no real connection to them. You want them to understand that number one, you know what you're doing, right? In that either you know what you're doing to help train them, or you know what you're doing, like you have a vision, you have a passion. Like people want to work for people that are excited and interested in the thing they're doing. Like I own a company. If I hate the company I own, how are my staff going to feel about that? Or if like, I show no interest, or like I always complain about it, or I'm like, I could take it or leave it. Like there's no security there. They're not going to like that. Like they want to see that you're interested and passionate about what you're building, because that will spill off into them, and they're going to be interested and passionate. Because at the end of the day, I want people that work for me that feel like partners. And so to feel that way and to feel some level of ownership in a company, they need the actual owner to like express that hardcore as well. And that's where training comes in. And training nearly never ends. You're going to have sprints. You're going to have probably like 1 to 2 weeks of like hardcore training where they're going to shadow you. They're going to learn from you. You're going to teach them, and then you're going to step back and watch them, and then you're going to teach them and watch them. But training will like forever continue, and you need to have somewhat routine stand-ups. You need to have feedback sessions. And during the interview, ideally, you learned how they handle feedback and the type of feedback they want to hear and how they hear it and like how they handle rejection or how they handle being told they're doing something incorrectly so that you can then express it to them in a way that they're actually going to hear and use as opposed to like getting defensive or getting upset. And I firmly believe when someone is fired, that they should never be surprised. Unless they've done something absolutely egregious, like they just stole $1,000 from you out of nowhere. Generally speaking, when someone's fired, it's because there's a pattern of issues. They should never be surprised to be fired. It should have been clearly documented, and you should have been trying to help them with whatever was causing the problems multiple times, um, and explaining to them what would happen. There's a thumbs up. Explain to them what would happen, right? Like, hey, you're not like this is not going well. Let's work on it. Blah 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 blah. Like let's we need to get to this level, and then they don't get there, and then you have a conversation. Hey, listen. We talked about this. We trained on it. We're not getting there. We really need this to be XYZ for, this to work out, for the company to be successful, for you to be successful in this role. Let's go over it one more time. By the third time, if you're like, hey, I don't think you're a good fit for this role, it should be surprising because you've essentially tried to train them twice or tried to talk to them twice about the thing that you're letting them go for. Uh, so if they're surprised being fired for something that wasn't like a horrible thing they did, again, I think that you're not managing them well. You're not training them well. You're not having great feedback with them. So, and just assume, similar to, again, you've probably listening to this, have worked in a job before. Complacency happens. It's natural. We're human. You will eventually start to slow down. You eventually get a little lazy, a little bored. So having continued conversations with them, actively like giving them slightly different tasks or new tasks, like upping the ante, being like, hey, you've been doing really well doing this thing. For example, at the warehouse, I started all she was doing was prep, pack, and ship, right? So she was just pulling stuff off the line, prepping it, and shipping it out. She got really fast. She made no mistakes. Like there was a period, I think that was like the first 3 to 5 months was just like her crushing that. Well, then we started adding in, all right, well, like, hey, now we're going to start doing Amazon. Now we're going to start doing eBay. Now you're going to start listing or taking pictures. Now you're going to start like more happily doing returns. Like we're adding layers to her job so it doesn't get boring. It doesn't complacent. She feels seen. She feels like rewarded, and with that, of course, comes a raise. So like again, that's what we try to do, and that's what I try to do. Even if the goal is that this person's only going to do one thing, it's going to be sourcing, right? Well, if you're teaching them how to source inventory for Amazon for the first 3 to 6 months, I assume, sorry, I'm trying not to sneeze, that they're going to have spend goals, they're going to have a budget, or they're going to have like specific types of products looking for, hey, like I need products that are at least $5 profit, 30% ROI, etc. Well, if they're getting really good at that and they can do that kind of in their sleep, well, then let's up the ante. Like, hey, all right, you've been spending $1,000 a day. Let's spend $3,000 a day, and let's look for products that we can make at least $100 on a sale. Like, let's change some of the variables, and you're going to take everything you learned from the first part, but now we're going to make it a little more challenging, a little more interesting. I think there was a study, right? Like, you ultimately want things to be 9% harder than what you're capable of doing, right? Like, I think it's like 9 or 11% harder than what you're doing currently. So if you like are running a mile in 10 minutes, well, like you want to shoot for running a mile in like 9 minutes, right? Like it should always be like it should be like between like 9 and 11% more challenging, and that's like the perfect human zone to then actually like meet that. And so if you went from like running a mile in 10 minutes to running a mile in 5 minutes, that means overwhelmingly difficult and you're likely going to give up. But 10 minutes to 9 minutes, 9 minutes to 8 minutes, right? Like we break it up into pieces, but it's challenging. And so it's the same thing here. Like if you can add like little challenges to the role over time, keeps them engaged, keeps them excited. You ideally have found out what motivates them early on. And so, you know, sometimes it's money, that's great, his raises, but sometimes it's other stuff. So like, for example, one of my staff, they were motivated because they want to take a vacation. Like they like to travel, and they were looking for a job that would pay well enough, but really would allow them to like travel more, because it was remote and they could work anywhere and all these things. And so instead of motivating them with like a bonus. Let's say I could have given them $1,000 bonus because like, I'm a big bonus guy. I just like I'm a fan of that rewarding. But for them, instead, we bought them a week long, like not a week long. It was a long weekend trip. So we're like, hey, like obviously, like if you're a salary and e-com seller, you probably have a lot of credit card points. I was like, go pick a hotel in this city, which I know they wanted to visit, and we're going to send you there for 3 days. I'll pay for the hotel. I'll pay to get you there. Like when you're there, like yeah, you're like you probably have to buy your own food and stuff, but like we're gonna cover like essentially 90% of the bulk costs of that trip. That was incredibly motivating to them. That was like that was way better than $1,000 because you know I've taken out a lot of like the pain of like figuring out the travel situation, but they also saw way more value in being able to travel. That was what they're motivated to do. So find out what motivates people, and it's way easier. Or like someone and as you get to know them as humans, it's also like I have someone who like absolutely loves animals. And so, if you know that as you're like looking for things to reward them or to make them feel seen, like you can then go and do things that are animal oriented for them. That like it's kind of again, it's like if you're dating someone and you actually listen to what they're talking about, you'll be able to buy the better gifts. Well, it's the same thing with your employees. Like I do think that you should like keep your ears open and listen to what they're saying, so then you can reward slash like make sure they feel seen in ways that resonate with them personally. So that's like to me, I know it's already 40 minutes in. That's to me like kind of the hiring quote unquote 101. It was like when is the right time, the type of person I like to hire, where to look, what we talked about. Like generally speaking, I like to look within my circle if that's people already work for me or people I trust. I'll talk to other business owners, friends, but referrals are great, especially for those expert level people. If you can get a referral from like another business who's worked with them, that's wonderful. How to interview, how to train, and how to motivate. The second part, which hopefully we won't take another 40 minutes on, is kind of like delegation. We talked about it a little bit through the hiring. Um, People have, I'm a person, so I mean, I suffered from this. I think it's natural to feel like there's a control problem, right? Like, well, I'm an owner. I'm the only person that's going to care about this at this level. So like no one's going to do it right or to this extreme or whatever it is. No one's going to do it the way I do it. And I can't trust anyone else to do it this way. So like I'm just never going to. That is, you know, that is I want to say how businesses die, but stagnation, hardcore stagnation. Um, we talked about my background. There's 5 companies that I'm either full owner or part owner of. I work on probably three any given day, and like three of those 5. But I also, at this point in time, could disappear for a week, and I think that the companies would still they would do well, right? Again, I don't think that they would. If I disappeared for a year, Um, would they explode? Would they continue to scale as aggressively? Probably not. But I could certainly go away for a week or 2 weeks. I got really, really sick last fall in 2024. Uh, Last October, actually, almost a year ago exactly. And it led to some really extreme stuff, a lot of hospital stays. And I was pretty much out of it for 6 months, um, if not longer, but like really bad for like 4 or 5 months. Uh, my businesses, they didn't grow. It was Q4, so it was unfortunate. They didn't grow as well as they could have, but they're still here and they did grow. And I didn't fear for them to stop running. And the only way that's possible is through delegation and through team members and through partners. Um, I have a very young family. I have a 9-month-old son. I really want to spend time with him. I have a wife with some medical stuff, and I want to spend time with her. And so I design my life around being able to do that. And so for me, delegation was not something that I had a choice in, right? Like it had to happen, but I did drag my feet way too long. And so when we talk about hiring, this goes back to the type of person. if I hire a body, just a person to fill a seat and click some buttons and do a job like do this, yes, sir, that person is way less likely to take ownership, way less likely to step up when needed. If I just disappeared, are they going to be proactive? Are they going to realize things aren't getting done and maybe they just start doing them? There's no better feeling than to disappear and realize you're really not needed. And so when I hire with the type of person that I would want to replace me, personality wise. They might not be interested in that, but I like that they could. And so when you do that, delegation becomes a lot easier. Um, and then it goes down to training, right? And you also have to realize that they're not you, but that doesn't mean that they're not as good or as they can't do as great of a job as you. They're just going to do it maybe differently. And I agree that as an owner, no one's going to care more than you, most likely, but they could care 95% as much, and that might be enough. If you really want someone to care as much as you, then you should go and find partners, which I'm a big fan of. All my businesses, so 4 out of 5 of those businesses have other owners or partners that either I've started the business and sold some of it to, or I came in as a partner. Huge fan of that. So picking your partner is probably a whole other video if you want this to be like hours and hours long. But that's the same as finding someone to marry, right? Having a partner is a big deal. You might talk to them more than you talk to your spouse. But if you hire the right team, they almost act as partners in a lot of ways. And you empower them to do so. You empower them again to make decisions and to make mistakes. And as they grow, you empower them to make more decisions. My warehouse now, I last year I was there every day. I was hands-on every day. Now if I get there once every like 10 days, that's probably average. Sometimes once every 2 or 3 weeks. But it runs about 85 to 90% as well as if I was there, right? Like I think that if I was there, it might be a little faster, a smidge. Um, there might be some more decisions I make that they're not comfortable making or haven't thought of, but that's because I know where the company's going. Like I want it to grow in a certain way that they are not thinking. But that day to day, like what needs to get done is done. The communication is still there. I talk to them every day. Um, and that wouldn't have been possible, right? That was a big trust thing for me because there's a lot of inventory, a lot of money sitting there. Um, we have clients that expect things from us, and so being able to walk away was important. When I was when we started a group called the Buy Box, which is our kind of Amazon e-commerce support server, for the first 2 years, it was pretty much just me doing kind of ticket support. Um, and I was getting massively burnt out. And we started hire we had hired team members and staff, and I just didn't think, at that time it was difficult to get someone that I thought was like as in it as I was in the weeds and like would do like the level of work that I was doing for our members. Um, but we did find those people, and we found them because they were originally members. They joined our community. We taught them not how to be staff. We taught them how to sell on Amazon and how to sell online. And they saw the difference we made in their lives, and they wanted to start making a difference in others. And so they came on board as staff. And so we talk about what motivated them, right? We talk about how I found them. Um, and then from there, over the years, they ultimately became part owners. So now I have partners in that business that care as much as I do. And, maybe when I'm gone, they push in different ways. They have different feelings about the success of the company. But I know that they care as deeply about our members as I do, because they were one. And I don't have to be as in the weeds every day. So, it doesn't happen immediately, but it is important to get there if you want to grow. I talked about here under delegation, I wrote the question why, and it kind of goes back to the hiring. Is like, when is the right time? Well, it's like when you start delegating, you have to ask yourself, why are you delegating? Like, why are you, it could be because the work itself is burning you out. That's where I was with the buy box. It could be that the time that you're putting into doing whatever it is you're doing, you can do more with that time. So that's the warehouse. I was packing orders, um, and that wasn't the best use of my time. It could be that you want to spend more time doing other things non-work related. You want the freedom, right? A lot of us get into this for freedom. And my son was born in January. So suddenly, I was really into freedom before, but I could work 12, 15, 16 hours a day if I wanted to. But now I don't, you know, I want to sometimes still, but I also would prefer like to see him, you know, just exist, right? Like feed him lunch. I get to have lunch with my son like every day. I take him every morning and I make him eggs. Uh, there's a freedom in that that's impossible if I don't delegate. And so the people that I see asking this question, and the people that get stuck, um, mostly I see them burning out. And what you'll find also if you don't delegate eventually is things start failing. You have every intention of doing everything, but you can't. And so eventually things start falling through the cracks, and you, I hate to say start disappointing people, but that's inevitably what happens because you start saying yes because you truly want to do something, but you can't. And so you don't do it, or you don't do it very quickly, you don't do it well, and that disappoints people. And so you actually are hurting the thing that you love by not letting other people help you. And you don't need like just let anyone help you. But if you go back to what we talked about, like you can find the right people. You can 100%, especially if you've been doing it long enough. You have likely customers or friends or community members or social media people. Like you have people that have watched you for long enough or been a part of what you're doing that would 100% work with you as a team or staff or partners. You just need to ask them. You need to give them the tools to be successful. You have to give them trust. You have to understand they're going to do things differently than you, but that's okay. Um, but you got to put the time in to help them see your why and why you do what you do. Um, but yeah, delegation is a really hard skill, but it is a skill and it takes practice. So start small, but start. Um, that's being said, don't start too early. Uh, unless, the reason that you might want to start delegating day one is if, like, again, you already own a few businesses, you're already doing other things, you've done it before, and you want to scale, right? So you start a business and you immediately hire people because you know how you've done it. That's different, but I think most people maybe delegate. Some people, I think the majority of people don't delegate enough. Then there's a small subsection of people who delegate too quickly, and they start an Amazon business, for example, and 2 weeks later they've hired a sourcing person, but they don't know how to source. The owner doesn't like know how to source exclusively very well, so they like hire someone and they believe that that person's going to know, and like the employee then is teaching the employer, which is fine. Um, in some ways, but you have to, again, going back to like with me with ads, you have to know enough to be dangerous. Like you have to know enough to know when someone's pulling the wool over your eyes, or like what questions to ask to like force a real answer. If you know absolutely nothing, someone can tell you anything, right? And so delegate tasks away that like make sense for you. Start with ones that you know when someone's BSing you and you know how to do, but aren't likely a great use of your time anymore. Um, and then once you start doing a couple and you see how it works, you'll be into it. It's going to cost you money. You're gonna have to spend money to make money in this case because obviously you got to hire people. It costs you money. So when you first start delegating or first start doing things, you might see profits go down a little bit or revenue. Yeah, mostly profits, right? Because revenue shouldn't change, but that should be a long-term success play, right? If you delegate correctly, like when I stopped working at the warehouse, well, I pay my team between $20 and $25 an hour. So if they work for 8 hours, if one of them works 8 hours, they're making, say $200 or $300. Um, that's not nothing, right? That's money I have to pay them. But 8 hours of me here at the computer buying inventory, I can make a lot more than $300. So, you know, figure out what you're going to do with your time when you start delegating. Or it could be, as I said, like I want to spend that time with my family. And so it's an investment in that. That's fine too. But understand that it's, of course, like likely you'll see a small dip in your profitability for a little bit, but it will work out in the long run, very much so, um, as you grow. So we did 55 minutes. I think this is the longest one yet. I appreciate you hanging out with me. Again, my name is Saul. I've been trying to do these somewhat regularly. Um, this was a really good question. Hopefully, I did it justice. I think that again, I'll probably do another one on partnerships, starting a business and finding partners for that business, or having a business and bringing in partners, because I think that's equally important. But for now, this is kind of like hiring and delegation. If you have questions on this topic that I didn't cover, or you want more detail on something specific, you can put a comment on YouTube, or you can go on Twitter at Saul Sells Stuff is my name. You can send me a DM. You can comment any of my tweets. Um, yeah, I'm pretty available on the internet. Again, I have some paid stuff, but I have a lot of just like me just hanging out like this, and I'm happy to answer questions that come my way. So thank you all as always, and I'll see you on the next one.